Welcome back to another video where I'm going to be discussing about what is the best type of property strategy for you to get into. Now, there are lots and lots of strategies around these days, from single buy to let, HMOs, rent to rent, rent to service accommodation, deal sourcing, so on and so on. So it can feel a little overwhelming if you're looking to get into property but you're not sure which strategy is best for you. Now, you'll hear people saying that, rent to rent's the best strategy, HMOs is the best strategy, when realistically there is no best strategy, so to speak. The best strategy for you may not be the best strategy for me. It all boils down to your personal circumstances, your personal situation and your end goals. So when I get asked what is the best property strategy, I always reply with, it depends on whether you are cash rich, are you time poor, do you have other commitments, are you wanting to be hands on, hands off, are you doing it for immediate cash flow, or are you doing it for future wealth? So all these factors come into play when deciding on what is the best strategy for you to use. So I'm going to give you some examples and hopefully you can take something from this video. You have a better understanding on what strategy is best for you and not everybody else. So if you're somebody who has a lump sum of cash, maybe you're a business owner, maybe you have a lot of savings or you've had inheritance and you've got a big chunk of money sitting there, then from my point of view, the best strategies for you are simple, boring, turnkey buy-to-lets. Or if you have a bit more time, then you can go down the route of renovating and flipping properties or using the BRRR strategy. Now, because you have the cash on hand, you're in a position where you can buy property using buy-to-let mortgages, bridging loans, or maybe even cash if you have enough. Now, if you have the cash and you have the time, don't know how you manage to do that, but if you do, then probably the best strategy for you is going to buy in properties that need a renovation, add as much value to that property as you can, then refinance the property and rent it out, or flip the property, sell it for a profit. Now, of course, this strategy will not suit everybody because if you are cash poor but time rich, then you're going to have to start your property investing journey using a different method, and one that requires less cash up front, and one that requires you to probably spend more time, do more work, be more involved, because if you haven't got the cash, you're going to have to put in more time. Now, if somebody comes to me and they say they've only got £5,000, for example, then the strategies that are best for you are possibly rent to rent, where you only need a small amount of capital to get started. So what this involves is you rent a property from a landlord, you guarantee them their rent per month, you then furnish that property and you then rent it out on bookings.com, Airbnb, sites like that, where you can charge a nightly fee for that property. Now, if you're spending £1,000 per month on the rent to the landlord, but then you're charging £100 per night to rent the property out as serviced accommodation, then obviously you can then make a profit between the difference of paying out your landlord and your rental income coming in. Now, of course, there are lots of other costs. It does take time. It takes a lot of setting up. However, if you're at that point, if you're at that stage where you only have a small amount of capital, then this is going to have to be the strategy for you. Now, another strategy that a lot of people get into when they're cash poor is deal sourcing. This is where you go and find properties for investors and then you package them together and sell them to the investor for a finder's fee. Often this can be £2,000, £3,000, £5,000 even. And this is a great way of getting into property if you have no money whatsoever. Now, there are some drawbacks to this. Obviously, you're going to have to spend a lot of time doing your research, doing your due diligence, also building relationships with estate agents. Obviously, you've got to get investors. Now, getting investors to buy property deals off you isn't going to be easy to start with. So don't expect an easy ride, because although deal sourcing is made out to be easy and very rewarding, it can be very difficult. So don't be fooled into thinking that anybody can go and be a deal sourcer and start making thousands and thousands of pounds every month right off the bat, because it's not quite as simple as that. However, it is entirely possible, and it's definitely a good starting point for people who want to get into property but don't have any funds whatsoever. Now, at the other end of the scale, if you are somebody that is time poor, you're a very busy person, you don't have time to actively invest in property or deal source or do rent to rent, but you do have cash available, you do have funds available to invest in property, then the best strategy for you is most likely to use a deal sourcer to find you a property, make it as hands-off as possible, go for a single buy-to-let or something that only needs a very small light refurbishment, get a tenant in there, rent that property out for some cash flow, and also building capital appreciation for the future. This is a great way for people who want to build a portfolio of properties, they want to build wealth, they want to secure their future for themselves, their own pension or their children. Whilst being as hands-off as possible, you can get a letting agent to manage the property for you. You can get a deal sourcer to find the property for you. So if you do things correctly, you can build yourself a nice sized portfolio without having to dedicate too much time to the process. Now, in terms of myself, my strategy has always been to buy simple, turnkey, boring buy-to-lets. Now, I know this is not all glitz and glam, as some people may make it out to be, but buying boring 2-bed vanilla buy-to-lets is a great way of building a portfolio. It gives me good monthly cash flow as well as capital appreciation. It also allows me to scale at a steady pace. So at the time of making this video, I'm currently on 7 buy-to-let properties, all let out, all bringing in a good profit every single month. Also, those properties have risen in value quite significantly over the past few years. And I'll also use these properties, I'll use my portfolio to future-proof my wealth, also act as a pension, and also to pass on wealth to my children. So in my situation, building a buy-to-let portfolio was the best option for me. I also have another business from which I was able to use some of the funds from my other business to build my portfolio. I've also used other strategies such as releasing equity from some properties. I've used the BRRR strategy also, where I buy a property that needs refurbishment, I refurb the property, add a lot of value to that property, and then pull equity back out. So I'm pulling some of my cash back out, which I then recycle to buy another property. So for me personally, this was the best method for me. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I don't mind spending time on a property. I also don't mind keeping equity locked up in a property if I know that that property is giving me good monthly cash flow, and I know that the property is also gaining capital appreciation over the term that I own it. So maybe you're in a similar situation to me where going down the simple buy-to-let route is for you. Maybe you're not, maybe you don't have the cash ready to go. When I first started out, I started with £18,000. This was enough to secure the deposit and also the renovation costs. Now this was quite a few years ago, so it's probably not possible to replicate that now. I always recommend that you have around 25 to 30k to get going if you want to buy a buy-to-let property or a BRRR property that you can renovate. This is kind of the cut-off line. If you have less than 25k, then I would be looking at the other strategies. Use those strategies that I mentioned, such as the deal sourcing, the rent-to-rent, rent-to-service accommodation. Use these strategies to build up your pot. Then once you have at least 25k, you can then go and buy a buy-to-let property, because with the other strategies, you're not building any wealth, you're not gaining any assets. All you're doing is using somebody else's assets to make cash flow from. So once you've made enough cash flow, once you've got a pot big enough for a deposit, you can then go and buy your own buy-to-let property, which will then serve you well in the future. It will serve you well in terms of building your wealth, building a passive income stream, and that property is yours, not somebody else's. If you do want a bit more help deciding on what is the best strategy for you, just drop me a DM on Instagram at J9Property. I'll try to give you some guidance and my best advice. Also, if you enjoyed this quick video, please hit the like button, as it really helps a small channel like mine to grow. As a property investor myself, all I'm trying to do is offer as much value as I can to people who are starting out or only have a small portfolio or looking to get into property. So hope these videos are insightful and useful for you. I'll continue to make them. I'll continue to put content out there. I'll continue to offer as much value as I can to you. So if you're not following the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed, because there'll be a lot more content coming. Or if you have any questions or opinions, just drop them in the comments below. And that's about it from me.